So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Today, we're talking about the critical role that policy plays in business success. It's especially important for regulated businesses like energy and telecom. Almost every business affected by government policies and regulations, especially in this current era of tariffs and top-down government regulation, policy is critical. Now, that's kind of tough for a geeky engineer like me to grok. I just think that it's all about the product. But it takes more than great products to build a great business. And so just take a step back. Politicians make laws and establish regulations, but many people work behind the scenes to develop good public policy. And there's no better person to talk to about good public policy than Carl Guardino. I got to know Carl about 25 years ago when he was CEO at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. I had just started to build my solar business, Sakina Solar, and seeing Carl in action taught me both the importance of good policy as well as the most effective ways to advocate for laws and regulations that would benefit my little business. Now Carl's the VP of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Tarana Wireless. Now he was in a similar role at Bloom Energy as they expanded market for their fuel cells. And Carl is now on the board of H2O America, which is the parent company of the San Jose water utility. And he was also on the board of the Independent Systems Operator. Now, Carl, I don't want to embarrass you, but you helped my career as a world-famous energy geek radio host and podcaster when I was your guest on the KLAV radio show 20 years ago. So welcome to the show, Carl.
Barry, it's a delight to be on your show and always a pleasure to see you.
It's a great time, lots and lots of opportunities, lots and lots of craziness, and public policy is making so much of a difference with every 350 million person in the United States. So first, tell us a little bit about your current role at Tarana Wireless.
I am so delighted to be at a mission-driven, a technology-brilliant company as Tarana Wireless. Tarana Wireless is actually almost 17 years old. It was created by 3 immigrants to our country who were earning their PhDs at UC Berkeley. And while they were there, they decided to do their PhD thesis on how do we help impoverished villagers in Ghana, in Africa, where none of them were from. Well, they got an A on their PhD thesis, and they started a company because that's what we do in the innovation economy. Fast forward, the first 13 years of Tarana Wireless was all research and development. In fact, $425 million, all privately funded. They refuse government funds, lots of near-death experiences as any innovation economy company goes through before the first commercially available product was available for the market just 4 years ago this December.
And so how does Tarana Wireless fit into the telecom ecosystem these days?
Sure. We are not an internet service provider. We're a technology that in just 4 years, more than 400 internet service providers around the globe use in order to deliver next generation fixed wireless access technology. So if you're looking at technologies used in the telecom spectrum to deliver home or business broadband, there's fiber, and fiber is the gold standard. Use fiber anywhere you can, where it's even somewhat cost effective and somewhat time efficient to deploy. So where fixed wireless access like Tarana Wireless fits in is really your fiber and solution. How do you serve those families in rural, tribal, suburban, and even urban America where fiber just does not pencil out as an effective solution? And then finally, there's low Earth orbit satellite that we hear and read a lot about, which is ideal in those hyper remote parts of our country and the world where actually neither fiber nor fixed wireless nor a hybrid of the two is going to serve that customer very well.
So basically, it's a way to cover the whole Earth
Yes.
with really good quality, high-speed wireless communications where you don't have fiber. Makes total sense.
Right. And at Tarana Wireless, we call it the four legs of the table. First, it has to be affordable to a family or a business, or the other three legs don't matter because it's going to topple over if we can't afford it. Second, it has to be reliable, and that's pretty close to 24/7, 365. And at Tarana, we're at about 99.8 reliable.
That's better than the fiber we're getting here.
It's amazing. And then it has to be high speed, and that's both on the downlink and the uplink. So what is a downlink? You're downloading your email and your Netflix account, and you're uploading onto Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx. So you have to meet the speed standards for both the download and the upload. And then finally, the latency. And the latency is from a tower site to the Cinnamon home or business and then back to the tower site again. So why is that tricky for low Earth orbit satellite? Because you're not going a mile or two from a tower. You're going 150, 175 miles from space and then all the way back up again.
So it's got to be, the latency is really important, especially for your video gamers who,
Exactly. For any of us with kids who use video games, or we're kids at heart ourselves, if you're glitching, if you're buffering, it is not a good experience for you, especially in satellite, which again, brilliant technology. We never put others down to lift ourselves up. So this is just data. But when the satellite is going out of range, and then you have to connect to the next satellite coming into range, that's when so often it has latency issues.
That makes sense. All right, so the technology is fantastic. I'm really glad you're at a great company. We happen to know a couple of the executives there. But let's start talking about public policy and advocacy. Give me some specific examples of how effective advocacy helps the wireless business and helps the energy business.
The coin of the realm for personal relationships, business relationships, and government affairs relationships is trust, authenticity, and honesty. And the role that we play in government affairs to help craft sound policy stems from those relationships. And we'll dive deeper into that. But unless you have that trust, honesty, and authenticity, you're not going to be at the table to help guide sound policy for the American people.
Now, I just pushing back a little bit on it. I mean, some people may say, well, it's just a matter of how much money you spend. So, but even if you spend a ton of money, if you don't have those other three legs of the stool, people will say, hey, this money might be wasted. I don't trust it. How does the money fit in?
It's fun on that question, whether it's my 24 years as CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which worked directly with and for 400 innovation economy CEOs like yourself, or my time at Bloom Energy as Executive Vice President for Global Government Affairs and Policy, or my 3+ years now already at Tarana Wireless. What I try to instill upon my teams is a circle or a bike wheel with spokes on the wheel. And you are 100% correct, Barry. At 12 o'clock on that wheel is government affairs. At 3 o'clock on that wheel is policy. At 6 o'clock on that wheel is community. And then at 9 o'clock on that wheel is politics. It takes all four parts of that wheel with those spokes to really be effective. So does politics play a hand in those relationships? Yes, it does. At the same time, though, if you don't have sound policy and good relationships through government relations and truly show that you care about the communities in which you do business and your customers are located, then you're going to get a flat tire awful quick.
And that's really important because especially for bicyclists like us, we don't want flat tires. So I just kind of think back to a couple of my good friends, and they say some of the most important people that they hired at their growing energy companies led their advocacy team. That was energy business without the right policy. If the government's doing the wrong thing that's contrary to business, it's terrible. And it's really good to know in advance because you may be part of framing that policy if you're a company with an advocacy team that's well connected. How does a company build a good advocacy team?
And that's what we're doing right now at Tarana Wireless. In their first 14 years as a company, they didn't have anyone in this role, which is why I was so honored when the CEO, Basil Alwan, reached out through a mutual CEO friend and asked if we could have coffee. And when he laid out that vision, and we talked about what would it take to kick off an advocacy department at this growing company. Not nascent in terms of how long they'd been a business, but nascent in terms of how long their products and services had been commercially available. So for us, it's what are you trying to accomplish? Is it laws? Is it regulation? Is it both? And as you have adroitly stated, in the utility space, in the telecom space, it's absolutely both. And then what levels of government matter to you? And what are the key policies or regulations that impact you for good or ill in the work that you're trying to do? And then you build your relationships from there. You also build your team from there. So we talked about to start out at a company that's still pre-public and, as we like to say, still an involuntary nonprofit in that we're bringing in revenue, but we're not quite profitable yet. Then how do you do it with a small team that still packs a big punch in terms of impact? And we decided to go with folks that could help us with international, national, state, and here at the municipal level as well. So 4 levels of governments with a team globally of just 3 of us right now.
I just remember the years that I was working with the Energy Committee and your group at Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and we dealt with things locally. The first time I was really in Sacramento and I saw what lobbying was literally in the lobbies of Sacramento, and then many, many trips and some incredibly effective trips to Washington, D.C. as we were advocating for good solar policies in those days. Now, I was a member of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Energy Committee, and it was very interesting the way the decisions were made, not just by, oh, we should do this, but there was a lot of time put into figuring out what are our policies, what are our overall goals, what are our principles. And I like to think about the principles as helping guide what the policies are. How do you coach your team to do that? And how do you develop those principles?
Yeah, so you're right, because you have to build a foundation before you build the house. And then as you build the house, to put solar on the roof and Tarana Wireless as your telecom for the delivery of broadband. So it's a whole structure that you have to build. And the principles that we always start with are, again, how are you going to build those relationships, maintain them, and grow them, and also have a sound strategy at your disposal. So the first thing we did as I joined and we started to build a team is, what is that first year plan that we're going to establish? So what are the risks and what are the opportunities for Tarana Wireless as a technology provider for home broadband and business broadband? Okay, then who are the people that impact that? So if you go to DC, who in the House and Senate matter? Who at the White House matters? What are the agencies that impact it, from the Federal Communications Commission to the Department of Commerce, the Department of Defense, the United States Department of Agriculture, and who are the key players in those areas? So that's all one. You have to map out the field in which you're going to be playing. Then number two, you never have a first meeting when you need something. It is too late if you have no relationship. You build relationships of authenticity and trust early so that when you do need to make a request, you're known, trusted, and appreciated.
And the other good thing about principles is policies are always changing. There may be a new administration, there may be a new mayor, there may be a new governor, something else happens. And if you have the right principles in place, it's easy to figure out how those asks may change without having to just throw everything up in the air and start from scratch. So much sense. Now, what mistakes do people and companies make as they're starting to advocate for public policy?
The biggest mistake, and an almost unrecoverable mistake, is to not tell the truth. And that's so much bigger than just not lying. Truth means telling the whole story. One of the biggest compliments I ever received early in my career, I was meeting with a state legislator, and he said, "Carl, what I most appreciate about you and what our team most appreciates about you, when you come in to advocate, you not only talk about your position, but you tell us the other sides, not side, because there's often many sides, what the other side's concerns are going to be." So we always do that as part of what we talk about in those early days of a relationship. Here's Tarana Wireless perspective. Here's the perspective of others in this space. They're not illegitimate. But here is how we would respond to those. And the level of trust that you build, because you're showing that policymaker that you not only care about the success of your company, but you also care about their success.
Well, you're also, by being honest, they can trust what's coming out of your mouth. So when you're criticizing your own position to a certain degree, they're going to say, "Hey, this guy's for real." And that incredible validator of trust. So we're in a very dynamic situation right now with the Republicans and Democrats, and people aren't really getting along. What are some good approaches to reaching out to politicians on all sides of the political spectrum?
First and most important is those old five letters, WIIFM. The question you're trying to answer is, for that policymaker, what's in it for me? Or what's in it for them? Why should they care about it for their constituency and the success of their priorities? What's in it for me?
I never knew that five-letter acronym, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's just smart. So if I'm meeting with a rural legislator in Pennsylvania or Ohio, they're going to care about first their constituents. As equally as good policy, what's going to be good for their efforts in their community. If I'm meeting with someone in Cleveland, the forest city of the United States, because of the heavy tree canopy, in a very urban setting, their concerns may be a little different than the rural agricultural community downstate in Ohio that I met with the week before. So always go in ready to frame the issue in the response to that question of what's in it for me.
Any advice for navigating political administrations that are kind of fundamentally hostile to your particular business?
Yeah, it's amazing. As diverse as our nation is, as divisive as it seems to be at this moment in time, there is almost always common ground to build upon. So what are those kernels that we all share? I haven't found anyone yet in public life, rural, tribal, suburban, or urban, who doesn't think it's important for their constituents to have affordable, reliable, high-speed, low-latency broadband. It has become a utility as electricity or water or roads or other forms of transportation have become. So we have that common ground there. And I've never heard of someone in public life say, if we serve some of my constituents, that's fine. No, they want internet for all of their constituents, not internet for some of their constituents. So there's much common ground we can build upon. And then it's the details from policy. How do we get to that mutual goal of internet for all through what Tarana Wireless does, through our internet service provider partners, that is going to help that public official serve their community.
Carl, you have such a brilliant head on your shoulders when it comes to policy. And in the energy business, electricity is becoming unaffordable. What suggestion do you have for solar companies, battery companies to kind of help convince politicians that may be dealing directly with public utilities commissions or other issues? How do you recommend companies like mine or bigger companies to really deal with the situation where the costs are going through the roof, and we really believe that our solution is the best solution, but you've got entrenched industries that are opposing that?
Yeah, and that's such a challenge for all of us. But when we meet with public policymakers, establish early, hopefully before the meeting is, what do they consider as affordable for the people they're trying to serve? And whether that's through the California Public Utilities Commission or at the federal level through the Federal Communications Commission, for you, all the regulatory agencies that we need to go through when we're delivering electricity, what is their view of affordability? And then from a policy or regulatory perspective, what do they need to strengthen or even change that's going to help them achieve their goal? The best sales are when we're solving a problem for the person with whom we're meeting, not them solving our problem. And it's the same with policymakers. So do your homework, do your homework, do your homework. What do they care about? What do you have that's going to help them meet those needs? And how do you reinforce to them that you're an honest broker to help get there?
You've just kind of described many of the meetings that I was in with your team, both in DC and in Sacramento and even locally. It's fascinating the way you built that and how effective it is. Anything else you'd like to add about public policy when it comes to energy and it comes to telecom?
Yes, there's so many other ways to refine this. One, because you mentioned my background as CEO of an organization that David Packard, the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, had created and built, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. There is strength in numbers. There's strength in common ground. There's strength in effective, authentic trade associations. So at Tarana Wireless, we belong to 5 federal trade associations or 5 national footprint trade associations, so that there is more strength in those combined voices. I will often tell my team that the power of 1,000 voices as one is much better than 1,000 voices all at once. So if you can combine that strength into a united voice through an effective, well-respected trade association, it's going to help you advance your company's goals.
And it's tricky to do that because if you have 1,000 voices, it's tricky to get them all mostly on the same page, but that's where the principles come in.
That's where the principles come in. And also to join an organization, what is the common ground that they all share in common, so that it is not so diverse of a membership that they're never going to agree on anything internally to advocate together externally. And that was always fun about the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and it's fun about the trade associations that we pick to engage in at Tarana Wireless. So one, they have to be incredibly well respected for their ethics. Two, they have to be effective in their advocacy. And three, who are the other members? Are we proud to be associated with them? Now, some of the best trade associations will not only weigh in on behalf of their members, but when it is appropriate to do so, they will also have their members weigh in with a similar message. And that can be incredibly impactful. At the leadership group with 400 member company CEOs, if you did a leadership group letter, great. That's one letter. If it is united enough where dozens of those members can also do their own letters with a common theme, it's even that much more impactful.
And all those letters or all those phone calls, land on the desk of the decision makers in politics.
They do. And while letters are important because you want to capture complex issues in a written communication, what we're doing right here on the Energy Show matters too, and that's face-to-face communications. I'm going to draw the analogy. Tarana Wireless technology is so groundbreaking that people literally did not believe it was possible. And here in Silicon Valley with what you accomplish, Silicon Valley makes what was impossible possible. So much of my work for the past 2 years has not been jumping onto a Zoom for a 25-minute slick PowerPoint presentation where I'm one of 20 Zooms that policymaker will be on in a day and will forget by the end of the day, but to respect them enough to fly to their community, get in a car, travel 2 or 3 hours, meet them at a tower site with a local internet service provider from their community that they trust, who uses Tarana Wireless to serve families and businesses in their community, and then drive with them to a home or business to sit down in someone's living room or conference room and in an unvarnished way hear their story of life before Tarana Wireless and since Tarana Wireless. That's what captures people. Yeah, it's the wow in how you present.
And with wireless, it is a requirement of life. It's a utility that everybody needs. And it's so unfortunate that people don't have fixed lines there, don't have that. It's kind of like the Rural Electrification Cooperative.
Yes, it is. But again, when you're truly on the cutting edge, people need to know it's authentic and real. By the way, this small company, pre-public, almost 17 years old, in just the 4 years in which our products and services have been commercially available, we're already serving families and communities in 28 countries, 47 of the 50 states, 1 of every 10 counties in the United States, with 425 internet service provider partners and more than 20 million homes passed. Because the technology works and people have experienced it themselves through trusted partners in their communities to know that it's an investment that they should make.
The fact that it works, the fact that there's value there makes it so much easier for you to get those policies right.
It is, because then we get to how do we expand this? How do we make sure that something that everyone needs, like electricity, water, and roads, how do we make sure, again, that it's affordable, reliable, high speed, and low latency? And that's where that relationship building and the trust and authenticity truly matter. Now, you mentioned politics before, and that's part of the spokes on that well-rounded wheel of helping communities make sound policy and sound regulations. So yes, we do engage in that, mainly through myself and personal money. But if I'm going to believe in a public official who has to stand before their constituents for reelection at different times and on different cycles, then I will often invest in them through my kid's inheritance, through the Guardino income. And Tarana Wireless does that in a small way as well. That is still being good stewards of our investors' money. But that again shows public officials, they believe in what they're doing. They believe in my ability to help advance affordable, reliable, high-speed home broadband, and they believe in my career in the process.
After listening to this and actually seeing you in action for almost 25 years, Carl, I regret that when I went to business school, there wasn't a course on public policy. We had business law, we had general management, we had accounting. Really, in these days, business schools should have a specific course on public policy.
And I'm surprised they don't. And so that's my nugget and takeaway from the show today, because they should. If for no other reason, then successful business people should care about their communities. And part of caring about your community are the government structures, local, county, regional, state, and federal, that impact our lives and our livelihoods. If for no other reason, it should be just good civics to do that.
Yeah, that's a terrific way of summing it up. Now, I don't recall you're ever running for office, but you've developed quite a family of runners. Tell us about your running family and your hobbies.
You're so kind. And that goes to the community part of that, of the spokes on the wheel that I mentioned. Remember, it was government affairs, policy, community, and politics. And on the community side, this is one of the amazing lessons that I learned from David Packard, co-founder of Hewlett Packard and creator of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Early in his career, he was at a conference of CEOs on wartime production. And he said, our job as CEOs is to care as much about our communities and our employees as we do about our customers. And it blew people away. But we should care about our communities. And so during my tenure at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, we created a foundation and we created races and community events. The first one, celebrating its 21st running, if you will, is the Silicon Valley Turkey Trot. That started in 2005 by my wife, Leslie, and I. I then built a foundation at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group so that it would have a home. And now for the past 10 years, removing the 2 COVID years where people didn't gather together, but the last 10 years, that dream of building community through a community event, a race, is the largest time Thanksgiving Day run in the world, 10 years in a row. From there, we established what we called our Santa Run Silicon Valley, and also our Heart and Souls Run. And then when I went to Bloom and then Tarana and kept both as the co-title sponsors, is our Stars and Strides Run around Independence Day. All told, those 4 community charity runs, the oldest now 21 years running, the youngest, Stars and Strides, 5 years running. We have been fortunate not only to build community, but by picking beneficiary nonprofits that help some of the most needy families in our region, we've been able to raise and donate about $15 million to Second Harvest Food Bank of Santa Cruz, the Boys and Girls Club, the Housing Trust Silicon Valley, the Valley Health Foundation, all those partner beneficiaries that can then leverage those dollars to help even more people.
And probably trillions of calories were burned over these last 21 years, and it's improved everybody's health.
Yeah, when Leslie and I created the Silicon Valley Turkey Trot, with just kudos to Applied Materials for trusting us from year one through year 21 as our title sponsor. It was a threefold mission. Yeah, and it was to build community, to help the needy, and to start the holidays in a fun and healthy way. Translate that last one, it's my excuse to have a third slice of pie on Thanksgiving.
That makes total sense. How can people get in touch with you?
Please reach out to me if you have questions on government affairs, politics, policy, or community building. Please reach out. The best way to reach me is at my Tarana Wireless address, Carl, C-A-R-L, at taranawireless.com, and I'll spell Tarana, T as in Tom, A-R-A, N as in Nancy, A, wireless.com. And like you, the days go by so fast when you're mission driven. And that's what you built at Akina Solar, at Cinnamon Solar, is the mission of helping families with their electricity in a clean and healthy way that's good for the family, the community, government agencies, and our world. Same with Tarana Wireless, same sort of mission-driven approach. And I'm going to come back to those three immigrants who came to the United States for a better education, getting their PhDs at UC Berkeley, and a better life for them and their families. That PhD thesis on how do we help impoverished villagers in Ghana, the very first deployment of Tarana, 12 years after they founded the company, was to help impoverished villagers in Ghana. They kept their word. And when you keep your word, you can build relationships.
And in terms of building a company, it's great when you're doing something that you believe in and that you're very energetic about. It helps you get up in the morning, and it's just it's a fantastic way to go through life. You just enjoy what you do.
And you're so good at it too, Barry. Leslie and I talk about our work not as our work. We actually call it our sacred work. We're on this planet to help folks, whether that's through our jobs, through our families, through our communities, through our business lives. And so we try to view it as this is sacred work. This is work that's actually helping other people.
One of the most gratifying things is when you're at a company for a while and you just see, hired this guy, right out of high school, and then he works really well. He's very effective. Then he gets married. Then he has kids, and you just it's a gratifying feeling. And you saw so much of that at SVLG.
Oh, it's amazing. And then if you are actually mission driven with goals that are measurable, when you achieve those goals, that sense of satisfaction is amazing. An old friend of mine, Chris McCormack of Australia, is a two-time Hawaii Ironman world champion and just an incredible athlete and human being. And he always talks about that a goal is a dream with a plan. A goal is a dream with a plan. And in our business lives, in our family lives, in our community lives, it needs to be the same way. What is the goal you're aiming for? And then have that dream with a plan that's going to help you get to that goal.
Carl, just wrapping up with that wisdom is terrific. And that's all the time we have on this week's show. But thank you so much for joining me. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.